Good evening, everyone. Welcome from the Optimist Club of West St. Paul. May I have everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Good evening and welcome to the 2021 Talk and Tacos event hosted by the Optimist Club of West St. Paul. My name is Kelly Casey and I will serve as the moderator. We'd also like to thank at this time Communication Chair Cheryl Bergstrom for coordinating the information necessary to assemble all candidates for a District 197 School Board Forum. The issues that will be discussed tonight are of great interest to our community and we thank each of you for being here. We'd like to make a list of the candidates in attendance tonight. John Chandler, over there. Jon Vaupel, over there. Mark Grandal is not with us yet, but we're hoping to see him later. Morgan Steele could not be with us this evening. Robert Reese, Sarah Larson, there. Stephanie Auran, and Tim Aune. Right there. Thank you very much to our candidates. Let's have a nice round of applause for them for being here. We appreciate it. All right. We want you to be aware that we are filming this evening, so to further share the important topics that will be posed to our candidates. We're coming to you from Dunham's Food and Drink, the meeting place of the West St. Paul Optimist Club. They are located on Lothenbach Street in West St. Paul, and we thank them for being our host and as well for making room for this special event. Optimist International is a worldwide volunteer organization made up of more than 2,500 local clubs whose members work each day to make the future brighter by bringing out the best in children, in their communities, and in themselves. Since 1971, members of this Optimist Club have impacted the lives of students in District 197 through projects and programs such as the District 197 Spelling Bee for grades 4 through 8, taking place each January, the Optimist Club oratorical and essay programs that provide opportunities for middle and high school students to advance to regional and district level contests, and the Two Rivers Dollars for Scholars program, in which a high school senior is awarded funding for secondary education. The decisions made by the school board affects us all. We appreciate the audience is gathered here tonight and will allow questions to be posed to our candidates during the second part of each candidate's response. We will be asking each candidate to briefly introduce themselves. They will be speaking in alphabetical order using their first name. Each will have 3 minutes. And in order to manage the time we have allotted, we will provide a visual cue to our candidates, which will be a yellow sign when they have 30 seconds remaining, and a red sign that means the same as the lights on Robert Street, you must stop. The candidate introduction will be followed in the same order with one general question in which they will have a total of 10 minutes in which to explain their position and also field questions from the audience at large. A yellow sign, once again, will be held up at the 8-minute mark and a red card at the end of 10 minutes. When a candidate is finished with the questions, he or she may leave. We understand that not every question may be asked tonight, and for that reason, the candidates have provided detailed contact information that's been distributed here and also will be listed in the closing credits of tonight's program, which will air in the future on Town Square Television several times prior to the November 2nd election. We'd like to begin now. Will the first candidate please step to the podium and give your first brief introduction? We'll be starting with John Chandler. Right over there at the podium.
Thank you, Optimist Club, for hosting us, and welcome. My name is John Chandler. I am a two-term school board member currently. Having been elected once and re-elected one time as well. I'm running for re-election because I believe there's still more work to be done, and I'm asking for your support. I am not from Minnesota. Please don't hold that against me. But I am a transplant like many, have lived in Mendota Heights for 16 years. We've raised 3 children in our community. My wife is also a transplant from Iowa. Don't hold that against her. And we love ISD 197. Many of you have heard this story. It bears repeating. We wanted to move to a much warmer climate. We only made it as far from St. Paul to Mendota Heights. We loved the schools when we discovered and learned more about them, so much that we moved homes as our family grew, and we stayed on the same bus route for our kids. Just being that close to school was very important to us. I was in the military for 20 years, so our firstborn came along when I was deployed, and so we were looking to have a better family time, slow the pace down of life as we knew it. I worked at the Dodge Nature Center for 6 years. Maybe the best 6 years of my professional life, commuting with my children to the preschool. And we just really love the communities. I've been a liaison for every school in our district. I have served on many of our committees. I have helped with levies. I've helped with bond referendums. I have volunteered for scouts. I've been a Cub Master and an Assistant Scout Master. I've taken scouts across the country for high adventure trips. I've been a volunteer coach for the Mendota Heights Athletic Association, and I just really care about the community, even though I didn't grow up here like many of you did. I have 3 key items that are important to me that I'm seeking in my re-election campaign. One is community engagement. I feel like as a school board member, we can do a much better job engaging the community, and I think part of that is by being more transparent and offering more opportunities for the community to engage us. So I think that's very important. 2, I think culture is really important. Our students and our teachers especially need to feel supported and safe, and if one person doesn't feel that way, then I think we have room to improve our culture. And so I want everyone to feel comfortable in their own skin, as well as the buildings that we have recently renovated for them. And the third thing is I want to ensure, I have to look at my notes real quick. Actually, I didn't have notes. I just forgot what my third point was. But anyway, culture and community engagement are really important to me. So thank you again for having me, and I look forward to answering questions.
Thank you very much, John. All right, the common question that all candidates will be asked is, what do you consider the biggest challenge to face District 197, and what skills or experience do you bring to the position to find a solution?
Thank you. I think we have to regain the trust of our community. Oh, student achievement is my third point. I think we have to regain the trust of our community. If you took out the pandemic, we offered enough opportunities locally to elicit a lot of excitement or interest in school board campaign this year, and I think part of that has to do with our community engagement. We need to try to be more transparent with our meetings, figure out better ways to interact with the public and be responsive to them, and realize that we're all in this together. It isn't us versus them. When our board terms end, for any of us, whenever that happens, we'll be a citizen again, just like everyone else. And so we're no better or no different. We're just at the moment in a position as a school board member, and I think we have to understand that that doesn't allow us to treat anyone differently, and we have to continue to work harder at community engagement.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to turn to the audience. Would anyone like to pose a question to John Chandler? If you do so, please go to the mic in the back there, right before the exit sign. If anyone has a question that they'd like to ask, please step up to the mic and ask that question now.
While they're walking up, can I finish answering the last question? I forgot to say how I can be responsive to that. I just want everyone to know, serving in the military for 20 years, I've faced fire from pretty tough individuals and different entities. And so to me, it's no different in serving the public. And I feel like my skills in the military have served me well to be prepared to serve in this role. As a citizen soldier for 20 years, I held a full-time job while serving the military and protecting you. And I feel like being a school board member, I allocate the time necessary to research and prepare for meetings and respond and speak to the community members who reach out to me. And I think I've demonstrated that I can do that for 8 years, and I know I can do it another 4. So thank you. Look forward to answering your question.
You said that you've been on the school board for a term already at least. What have you done that you feel has made students better off in ISD 197?
Thank you. 2 things that immediately come to mind. One, I helped draft the equity test, the 4-way equity test.
Can I interrupt you? Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like what you feel that it's accomplished for students with the equity test?
Yeah. So I helped create the 4-way equity test, and that is something that we study every time we review policies or we consider programs that are going to be instituted. Because again, our role is governance. It has nothing to do with management. And so by having a guide like that for our policies, that infiltrates down into the management and gives guidance specifically to them. And we feel like equity is important for all of our students. And by having the 4-way test, which is not something we had before, that's a great way to help guide us to ensure that we're trying to look out for all of our students as well as our teachers. The other thing is I helped create a parent ambassador network. That's actually something that I created and activated at the Dodge Nature Center, and from there with the previous superintendent we created that model for this district as well. And it takes parents from every school in the district, brings them together to exchange ideas, and ultimately it's how do we make things better for students and how do we make things better for each school community, because we can all learn from each other.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question?
I do. First of all, with regard to transparency, your name change with Sibley was an exercise in how not to be transparent. Very poorly done. But my question is this. You, the district, the school board, the superintendent, have embarked on apparently what's called an anti-racist policy. Now, the father of anti-racism, Ibrahim X. Kendi, has said that it is not possible to be both anti-racist without being anti-capitalist. Are you an anti-capitalist? And because apparently it's not possible to be an anti-racist unless you are in fact an anti-capitalist.
Great question. I wasn't anticipating that. So first of all, I don't believe that we have any anti-racist policies in our district. Far from that.
That's not what your superintendent has said. So are you saying that you're going to go, that you're not on the same page as the superintendent in this regard? Because he said any teacher that's not on board with this can hit the road. In so many words.
So which question would you like me to answer first?
The anti-racist, anti-capitalist question, and they all relate to each other, because you're saying that you don't have anti-racism, which hopefully you don't, but your superintendent says otherwise. So, you know, these two questions are interrelated.
So I tend to be a glass half full person, so I like to focus on positives. And I believe that we are trying to lift students and teacher voices up by being more equitable. I do want to quickly address your initial comment about the name change. While I'm a current school board member, I can't comment and speak out against any decision that I was a part of, even though I think everyone knows that I voted against part of the name change process as we went along. Maybe that wasn't seen clearly, but others who have been paying attention know that I was very vocal throughout the whole process, insisting that we try to be more transparent with that process and try to engage the community more. But again, I understand I'm a part of the group that was a part of that. Ultimately, I voted for the name change initially, and maybe things could have gone better. I think we can learn from our process, and try to do better next time. So I don't disagree with you there. As far as for being anti-capitalist, I guess I've never considered myself an anti-capitalist. I've never considered myself a capitalist. I consider myself a citizen, and I try to stay away from labels for myself or anyone else.
Thank you very much. That concludes 10 minutes for Mr. Chandler. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Once again, all the questions will not be asked tonight, but we do ask each audience member who does step to the microphone to limit their questions to one question, please, without a follow-up. If you'd like to follow up following this event, you certainly can contact them through via phone or via email. Okay, our next candidate is Jon Vaupel. Have you come to the audience? You have 3 minutes to give a brief introduction, and then we will ask a general question.
Okay. So I am Jon Vaupel, and I am running for school board in 197. Thank you for coming out today. Thank you to the Optimist Club for hosting this. Usually when I start out, I also want to make sure that I thank and appreciate our teachers and educators and early learning providers who are doing extremely hard work right now, and they've been doing extremely hard work for 2 years and extremely hard work before then. I think it's also important to acknowledge and appreciate our families right now who have with young kids and students who have had to navigate a really hard couple of years. So I think it's important to say that. Who am I? I'm a parent of 2 young kids who attend Mendota Elementary. I've been a resident for 5 years. I'm a former kindergarten teacher. I taught in Baltimore City. I have 20 plus years of experience in the field of education. I have experience at the federal level, working for the U.S. Department of Education, working for the Obama-Biden transition team, and also for Senator Biden. I have experience at the state level. I currently work for the Minnesota Department of Education. I also have experience at the local level. There, I, once again, was a teacher in Baltimore City in kindergarten. I also helped manage an early learning program in D.C. public schools. It was a special education program for children ages 3 to 5. I have served on the PTA at Mendota Elementary. I've been a youth soccer coach for 5 years, and I've also participated on the Parent Ambassador Network. Why am I running? COVID-19, number 1. We need to continue to require masks so that our students can be in school and are safe. We also need to continue appropriate prevention and mitigation strategies so that our students can stay safe and stay in school. We also need to support our families and our students who are unable to be in school right now for various health reasons. I believe strongly in diversity, equity, and inclusivity. These are not just words to me. Those are principles that I held dearly during my professional career, and I have experience and practice applying those at the program level as a teacher in my kindergarten classroom, working with families as well. I also believe deeply in transparency and access, and I think, you know, the last couple of years have been really hard, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. Our school board made the right decision to require masks, so thank you, current school board. At the same point in time, I think that we need to be more transparent about how decisions are made, and we need to really double down, maybe even quadruple down, as far as access. I've heard from a lot of community members across the board that they feel that decisions are not being made with the involvement of all parties. We need to build on our successes, and we need to show what we can do, that we can achieve good things for our students, and we can do that in a positive, civil, and respectful way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, the question that we're asking of all of our candidates this evening is, what do you consider the biggest challenge facing this district, and what skills or experience do you bring to helping to find a solution?
Okay, so you can't see this. I'm going to hold it up. I have a clipboard with me. It's my security blanket. I don't love talking in front of groups of people. The upside is that when I taught kindergarten, I had no choice. So I have my notes with my handy clipboard. So biggest challenge, COVID-19, how we're handling it, how we respond to it. I think that with our response, It's not about just returning to the way things were before COVID-19. I don't think that our education system was working for all students before COVID-19. In fact, we know that it wasn't. Minnesota has some of the greatest educational disparities in the country. So it's not about going back to what was before. It's about how do we improve upon what we've done and learn and grow. So that, to me, is the biggest challenge. The second question, if I recall correctly, skills that I bring to the table. So school board makes policy for the district, right? Not one policy, not two policies, all policies for the district. They review policies, I believe, every 3 years. So I have experience as a teacher. I have experience as a policymaker, both writing statute, working on policy regulation. I have experience at the program level. I have experience working with special education students, gen ed students. I'm a parent. I've worked with different communities. In all those roles that I've had, I've worked with a variety of communities. And I consider myself to be an ally. And it doesn't mean that I'm perfect. I'm far from perfect. But I'm learning and I'm growing. And I think, once again, coming back to access, heard loud and clear from community members that I've spoken to that currently not enough and not all of our community members feel included and invited to conversations. I have a background in early learning. They don't always have a seat at the table. And I think that's a different skill set that I would bring. By early learning, I mean working with our younger children, birth through age 5. I have a lot of experience building relationships. I also, try to take a solutions-oriented approach. There are plenty of problems and challenges, especially in education. They sometimes might feel intractable, but that's why I'm running. That's why I've taught. That's why I continue to stay in education. I can't help but believe that there's a lot of good work that's happening. We have a lot of great teachers and family members who care. Once again, I'm proud of the work that our school district has done. Sometimes there's a counter narrative, but I think there's a lot of success. There's a lot of pride in this community in our schools, and that's something that I've heard, and that's something that I'd look to build upon.
Thank you. Once again, we will turn it over to audience questions. We will remind you, please limit your question to one question so that everyone has an opportunity. Go ahead at the microphone.
Hello, thank you for being here this evening. I had a different question, but you brought up the masks, and that actually is kind of a sore point. I would like to know, because we have relatives in rural Minnesota, I have relatives in other states, and my children have lost friends from their school because they have gone to private schools because they don't want to be in masks. There's Mask Off Minnesota and many resources that say wearing a mask can actually be bad for your health, and natural immunity is good for you when kids are, for the most part, healthy children are 99.999, and I've heard 99% able to get over COVID. So we're looking at high schools and choosing high schools, but it's so hard that why is Sibley choosing, and the entire district, masking the children when all of our friends and relatives and the private schools right within this area are not masking?
Thank you.
So why do you, why do you think?
Thank you. Go ahead.
Follow the science, follow the guidance from the CDC, from the Minnesota Department of Health. We're going to have to agree to disagree on that, and I could not disagree more. It doesn't mean that these are easy choices. It does not mean that masks are hard for some students and some families. This, to me, is about keeping our schools safe so that our students can stay in school. I believe very strongly in this. I know family members, not family members, I know friends and I know community members who are scared. I know people who are immunocompromised. And the approach is one of public health, where we have to look out for the well-being of everybody. And that's going to mean that this thing that some people oppose drastically, I encourage you to go ahead and make the best choice that you can for you and your family. It may be something different, but masking is something that I unequivocally support.
Thank you. Can we have another question?
John, you mentioned that you worked on the Obama-Biden transition team and that you also worked for Biden when he was a senator. I'm sure that you know, and I'm sure that you'd agree that right now our country is so polarized and so divided, and anything political is so contentious. And as a former teacher, I always tried to keep that out of my classroom, right? We can teach values, but we don't need to be teaching politics. So my question for you is, with such heavy partisan involvement, how can we be confident that you're able to put all of that aside and govern on the school board in the nonpartisan manner that that demands?
It's a good question. You know, the great thing about our country is that as citizens, we're able to express our views and opinions. To me, I think that I've had those positions and worked for those places is an important part of the story. It doesn't define who I am. So, yes, I worked for Joe Biden. Yes, I worked for the Obama-Biden transition team. Yes, I worked for the U.S. Department of Education during the Obama administration. It does not mean that I agreed with everything that they said. And I was talking to someone else about this who had a very similar question, not quite the same. And part of it was, I don't define who I am by who I worked for. I also worked for Marion Wright Edelman at the Children's Defense Fund, who I admire and deeply respect. At the same point in time, I define myself based off of my values and what I stand for. It doesn't always fit with what other people think based off of some of those entities. I affiliate more as a former kindergarten teacher. I affiliate more as an educator and as a policymaker. Politics to me also don't belong in the classroom. I think when I taught kindergarten,
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you. It is 10 minutes. Your time is up. Thank you very much for being here. If you'd like to follow up questions, please contact him at the information. Thank you very much, candidate. Our next candidate is Mark Grondal. Is he here? No? All right, we're going to go on to our next candidate. Let's see, Marcus Hill. Thank you. Sorry, I got a little bit mixed up there. We'd just like to hear an introduction for you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to everyone for coming out on a rainy night and a somewhat cool night. I appreciate you all being here and your participation in the civic process of selecting a school board member. My name is Marcus Hill, and I am a 15-year resident of West St. Paul. I think it goes without saying that many of us are here because we do love this community. I've done any number of things in the community. I've volunteered on different committees for fundraisers. Like John Chandler, I've also been a Cub Scout leader. I've been a mentor to a lot of our students through our Tri-District Collaborative. I've also been involved as a student liaison through Friendly Hills, as well as volunteering in schools and classrooms. And so those are some of the things that, for me, make this community special. And then, of course, along the way, we've had a lot of fun, and we've gotten to know each other and build community around the table in my living room or in my dining room or on my patio through some of those fundraisers and hosting dinner parties, and money that goes directly back into our schools to help us with iPads and stations for iPads and refreshing our IMCs and things that are really important to our students. And so that really kind of leads me to my why. Why am I here, and why did I decide? And by the way, for those of you who don't know, I am on the school board now. I was appointed to the school board back in January. And I can say in the last 9 months or 10 months or so, I've done a lot of listening. I've done a lot of learning. I've also participated. I sit on 4 different committees for the school board. I sit on the Association of Metropolitan School Districts. So that's a legislative branch for all school districts, and pushing our agenda to our legislators, as well as making sure that we have the critical resources for our teachers, for our staff, and for our administration, which is one of my whys. So thankfully, I'm able to lean into that why through AMSD. I am also on the Equity Committee, which is another one of my whys, and something that I'm really passionate about: diversity, inclusion, and equity. Again, you'll hear people say it's not a buzzword for me, and I can speak to my very specific examples of that in a bit, about more about who I am. I also sit on Early Childhood Learning Committee for the district as well, and for the board. And there are great things that are happening with that staff and what's happening in early learning. And in fact, I wish I had a better opportunity for that with my kids. And then finally, I am on the Results Committee, which is responsible for the superintendent's goals. And so that's who I am, and that's my why. Each of those things speak to why I joined the school board and the work that I've done so far. I've got a lot of work in front of me, and it's why I'm here, it's why I'm running, and why I want to be on the school board.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have questions I'm sorry, our general question first, excuse me. What do you feel is the biggest challenge facing the district currently, and what skills or experience do you bring to help to find a solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we can all agree that we're in a pandemic, but really looking beyond the pandemic is what we should be thinking about, because we're in a point in time, and yes, we're thinking through our different positions on masks and what that means and how we keep our kids and our teachers and our staff operating in schools safely, and that is absolutely paramount, is to make sure that they're in school. Not being in school is far more detrimental to their mental health, to the mental health of our community, and for us as families, and so we absolutely have to keep our kids there. Beyond that, it's looking at closing the achievement gap. Our schools are doing a fantastic job right now. I know there have been some assertions about that. Our kids are right at the top of achievement. So when we take a look at our GPAs have actually increased in the last year from 60% to 67%. When we take a look at our kids and how they're testing on the ACT, they're doing really well. Yes, there are 29% of those kids who are hitting all 4 factors of the ACT, but when we think about that in context, the state average is about 30%. So we are doing really well as a district. Now, I don't think that any of us are here because we think that we are doing the absolute best that we can, right? There's a lot of work for us to do in closing this achievement gap. Part of that is social emotional learning and making sure that the kids have the tools that they need to cope with decision making and thinking about things beyond the classroom to make sure that they're ready to learn. Thinking about inclusion and inclusivity and thinking about what does that mean for someone who's looking to be represented and see themselves in that classroom, whether it's a teacher, it's curriculum, or other leaders in the classroom. Those are all things that really matter, that help those kids get ready to learn and that help us start to close that achievement gap. We can look at kids and be innovative and think about their individual needs. This isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. Right? There are kids who come to us with different abilities, and we have to think about those abilities and how do we unlock those abilities so that all kids can achieve at their highest level. That definition, by the way, is very different for each kid. We can't take hey, this kid's not doing really well on the ACT and therefore they're not prepared to learn. Everyone has a different why, everyone has a different unlock, every kid has a different destination, and we really have to get innovative about how we think about these things and how we address that with our kids. So that gap that we're talking about is really digging into the data, and it's one of the skills that I bring as a marketer, making data-driven decisions, as well as taking a look at the feedback from our community, listening to our teachers, because they're on the ground, they're doing this every day, and we should be taking that feedback and everything else that we know and making really informed decisions. As I think about other skill sets that I bring to the table, I've been a leader for our Black Employee Resource Group in the place where I work, and we built a day of unity for all people to come together during the time of strife, where we're all going through a lot of social, emotional learning ourselves as a society. I saw people at work hurting because we're all kind of going against each other and fighting and trying to find our place and what does this mean? We decided we needed to come together. We had tens of thousands of people participate in a day of unity. So bridge building, communicating, and thinking about how we bring people together are certainly skills that I can bring. I listen to our community and we bring that voice into the decisions that we make. And those are all things that we do need to do better. And we can have those conversations as a board, because the board's responsibility is to really make our district better.
Thank you very much. Time is short. We're going to ask if there's any audience members that have a question for Mr. Hill. Go ahead.
Yes, you talked about social emotional learning, and John mentioned this in his statement about how we've kind of learned over the last 19 months that the education system as a whole just has a lot that it can improve upon. So I'm wondering, going forward, like, what are you going to take from what we've learned in the last 19 months moving forward to improve upon how we're working on mental health and social emotional learning when it comes to students as well as their families and even the staff in the district?
That's a great question. And there's so many ways to go at this, right? And there's no one answer. So there's a lot that we can learn from COVID, first of all. COVID gave us the ability to pivot and really see our infrastructure and use our infrastructure. So technology to do in-person learning can be used as outreach to families. So if you have a child and you need to talk to a family who doesn't have access to the school because they don't have a car to get themselves to a physical location, we can use that same technology that we used during COVID to have that conversation with that family and to hear their voice and not just accept an email or have them fill out a form. A conversation is more powerful than any form that you can fill out. So we have the technology, let's use it. And by the way, we can use that same technology to reach across the world and have kids interact with other nations and other kids. So we have the platform to do that. And I think understanding what those needs are, because there are a lot of kids who are coming to school with grown people problems, and we have to take those problems off of their chests and get them unlocked so that they can learn. And I think through that, you start to address some of those mental health issues. They shouldn't have to think about what their parents are going through and how can they learn or how can they take care of their brothers and sisters and do some of those things. We as a community, we can take some of that burden off of their chests. And I think through the school district, how do you build systems that help with that?
Thank you. I think we have time for one brief follow-up question. Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
Hi. I know when my parents and my grandparents and my great-grandparents, when they went to school, there wasn't much diversity or equity or culture in the schools. They just had to kind of toe the line. And I wonder, you mentioned it a little bit, but I wonder if you can explain more why equity and diversity and culture are important in our schools today.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I'll say is, you know, as a person of color, when I go to schools and I went through school, there's a lot of our history that I don't see represented in the schools. And a great example of that is earlier this summer, my family and I took a vacation out east. We went to Fort McHenry in Baltimore, and we studied about the Battle of Baltimore. One of the things I learned there is there were thousands and thousands of black people who were part of that battle. They weren't able to fight with guns, but they supplied food, they took care of the ill, they loaded the weapons. And when that battle was won, those people cheered loudly, more boisterously than anyone else, right? And it's all documented right there in Fort McHenry. I don't see that taught in schools, and so that representation does matter. When you think about culturally, helping other kids understand different cultures and different people gets to an empathy, and when you get to that empathy, we can really start to solve problems. That starts with listening, understanding, proximity. You get to that empathy, and we really start to break through these barriers. We understand that we are much closer in our goals and our values than we're led to believe or than it feels right now. We're all bound by a set of common goals. We're all here in this room today for the common goal of our children and what's best for our district. We might have different ideas and ways of getting there, but those things do matter, ma'am. So I do appreciate the question, and thank you for asking.
Thank you very much. Our 10 minutes are up. Thank you very much, Mr. Hill. Next up is Mark Grondel. Did he arrive? No? Okay, we're going to go on to our next candidate. Robert Reese. Thank you for being here. All right, you have 3 minutes for a brief introduction. Thank you.
Thank you to the Optimist Club for the opportunity. You know, in the past I've talked about the long-term downtrend in academic achievement in the district, and that's not something that I want to rehash tonight. My message tonight really is for the parents and the students. What I believe the mission of our school should be. And I believe that a quality education provides kids with two great gifts. The first of those gifts is an increase in critical thinking skills, which leads to an increase in independent thought, and ultimately that leads to an increase in personal freedom. That increase in personal freedom then leads to the second gift of education, and that's an increase in personal liberty. So I'd like to define the words freedom and liberty for the audience. Freedom is defined as the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or resistance. Liberty is defined as the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, or political views. So I'd like to ask the audience to consider this question. Does the current curriculum lead to an increase in academic achievement? No, it has not. Does the current curriculum lead to an increase in personal freedom? I would argue not, because critical race theory and its twin sister, diversity, equity, and inclusion, are nothing more than groupthink mandates which would impinge on my right to act, speak, or think as I would want without hindrance or restraint. Does the current curriculum lead to an increase in personal liberty? Again, I would argue no, because the school authority would suppress my viewpoints. So that leads to a second question for everybody to consider. And that is the increase in personal freedom and the increase in personal liberty that we experienced under Minnesota's old curriculum, is that what the existing educational structure fears with the new curriculum? If your answer to that question is yes, then consider voting for me, Robert Reese. And I would also ask your consideration for voting for Stephanie Auran and Mark Grandal, so that we can return to a curriculum that is apolitical, led Minnesota to a #1 ranking in education in the country, and will maximize your child's personal freedom, liberty, and academics. I believe this is a noble, ethical, and moral cause. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Now our next question for you as well. What do you consider the biggest challenge to face the district, and what skills or experience do you bring to helping to find a solution?
Well, I think that my comments tonight outlined fairly well what my concerns are. If I'm elected to serve, I will bring a fresh viewpoint that's outside of the educational or government industry. Mine's a medical background. I believe I can bring effective communication skills. I listen to all viewpoints, but my #1 mandate is an improvement in academic performance, because I personally believe that that increases freedom and liberty among the students. And the third thing is, when you did what I did for as long as I did, you have to have the ability to problem solve. And I think that that can be a useful tool as well on the board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With the remaining time, we will ask members of the audience if they have any questions, and if they will step to the microphone and keep their questions limited to one and keep it brief so that he can answer as many questions in the remaining time. Thank you.
When you started off with freedom and liberty, and your belief that that should be what what students are you talking about? Because if you're having a conversation about all students, what your statement in that outline does not include black children. So my question to you is how, if you are elected on the board, what is your connection to the black community?
Yes.
And where do you feel like the school board should come into that? And how do you feel like your statement of freedom and liberty really projects that to the black community?
Thank you for the question. So this is what I would say, is I believe personally that all children, American children, are equal under the law. My family consists of 16 individuals. 6 of them are Caucasian, and 10 are either of African descent or they're mixed race. And there's one person in my family for sure that thinks differently than I do on issues of freedom and liberty. But the majority of my family members believe in America and believe in equal opportunity. And so the way I'd like to answer that is I think that if we teach in an apolitical fashion, then that equalizes every child. I don't believe that children go to school to learn about political theory and to only exist in separate groups. I believe that they go to learn and have fun and have friends. And the divisive theories that have been advanced in recent times cause division, and I don't think that's helpful to black, white, brown, yellow, red, any child. I think we need to come together in that regard. Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question for Mr. Reese?
I don't think so, so can I do the backup question?
Just a moment. Is there anybody else that has a question? If not, if you have a follow-up question until time allows.
Okay.
Please step closer to the mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you packed a lot into that answer that really didn't answer my question. But what I would like to say to you is when you mention diversity, equity, and inclusion, I have to say this, and I'm trying to bring it in because I'm trying to take everything that you said in. How, and I'm going to ask this, how do you plan to include black children? Because I noticed one thing you said American. Let me explain something to you. The children that are in our district are not all born here. So when you make a statement as an American children, then are you discluding my children in your plan? Because my children are not from here. I'm not from here. So I'm asking you this. Does your plan include my children in the upbringing and increasing their ability to thrive? Because I didn't hear that.
100%, ma'am. Coming from my family background, our belief was that as a family, we were all one. And I believe that that can exist in the school community too, irrespective of race, gender, or any other issues that people bring up. I think that's been lost, and I think that's a shame. But I think that every child deserves to be treated with respect and dignity and be included. And my concern with critical race theory and diversity, equity, and inclusion is it separates people instead of brings them together. So your children, all children would be included.
If there's any time remaining, no, there is not. We've concluded. Thank you very much, Mr. Reese, for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Our next candidate is Sarah Larson. Would you step to the podium, please? We'd just like to ask you for 3 minutes of your time to introduce yourself, and then we'll get on to our general question.
Thank you. Like she said, I'm Sarah Larson. Thanks to the Optimist Club for having us today. My dad has been a member of the Optimist Club in New Ulm, so this has like a weirdly little special place in my heart, so I appreciate that you guys are hosting this. My husband and I have been a resident of Mendota Heights for 14 years, almost 15 years. My son Tommy is a freshman at Two Rivers. My daughter Lily is a sixth grader at Friendly Hills. They both went to Mendota Elementary and did early childhood at both Pilot Knob and at Somerset. So we've been in a lot of schools in the district. My niece just graduated last spring from then Sibley, now Two Rivers. I've been a kind of ridiculously active volunteer in the schools for over 10 of those years. I have to try to remember my list. The Parent Ambassador Network that both, I think John and, I don't remember, Marcus and John maybe mentioned, that was started at over 5 years ago now, working with the superintendent. I've been a member of that team, I think all but 1 year, and it's been a really beneficial opportunity. I've gotten to know parents from every school in the district, most of the team that works for our superintendent. I'm familiar with the workings of the district thanks to that team. I was a part of the Strategic Framework Development Team. It was a 3-day group of about 50 people from throughout the community that met to develop our current strategic framework. I've been the co-president of 2 of our school's PTAs 2 times over, which is quite a time commitment when you add up all the years. I'm on my 2nd term at Friendly Hills. I'm a mentor at the high school. I've ran more book fairs than I can count. Carnivals, fundraisers, math groups, reading with kindergartners. I love it. On top of all that, I do have a full-time job. I have a degree in chemistry from St. Ben's and a master's in public health and environmental chemistry from the U of M. I've worked for the Pollution Control Agency for the state of Minnesota for 18 years. That whole time I've worked in the remediation program, which is a cleanup program. We deal with Superfund sites, landfills, contaminated properties. So a big part of why I work there is because I don't just want to work, I work to serve my community in Minnesota and make it a better place. So I mean, I'm running because I love our community. I love our schools, obviously, from my involvement up till this point. And this feels like the next natural step in my service to that community. I'm ready to listen. I'm ready to meet new people. I'm ready to hear from opinions that I haven't already heard. And quite honestly, so far in my experience in this campaign, I've met some amazing people and heard opinions that have exploded my brain and made me so excited to dig in and serve on the school board. So I'm eager to talk to more people tonight, learn more from these conversations, and have a really fun next 2 weeks before Election Day.
Thank you very much. I think that's the first time one of our candidates has said the word fun. Our general question is tonight, what do you consider the biggest challenge facing District 197, and what skills or experiences do you bring to helping to find a solution?
Yes, wonderful question, and really a wide variety of answers, which I've enjoyed. But I think I would have answered the question differently a few years ago, maybe. As part of that strategic framework, one of the top 3 development items we talked about was social emotional learning. And then the pandemic hit, and our kids were at home for a good portion of 18 months. And I watched 2 kids navigate that, and I watched a lot of teacher friends navigate that, and it was quite a ride. And now social emotional learning to me holds a different, bigger, heftier, like a deeper sense of values. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, social emotional learning, I think some people are like, what are you talking about? It's the development of social skills, being able to work with other people, being able to advocate for yourself, to make friends, coping skills, stress management. It's skills that everybody wants people to come out of high school with to enter the job field, no matter what their job is. The self-control, self-regulation. Being in the schools these last few weeks since school started, kids have lost some of these skills, and teachers already had full plates of what they needed to work on with these kids to do regular education. So to add social emotional learning on top of that is a lot, but it's critical for these kids to be able to move forward and succeed. So I think I come in ready to hit the ground running. I think that's my advantage there. I've been thinking about social emotional learning. The other 2 important things kind of on my slate are equity, the budget, and communication. I mean, those things will kind of never go away. Those should always be the priorities of school boards. But I've like I said, been a very involved parent. I already kind of know the players at the table. I've worked with the superintendent and his board and his team quite a bit. I've taken my own concerns about my kids' education to the school board and worked with them and had complaints, and I've felt like what that process is like, so I'm familiar. I've been at school board meetings. I've been a part of the levy, the Vote Yes team for the levy, for this one, the past one, the last bond. I'm in knee deep at this point, and I'm ready to dive in, so I'm excited.
Thank you very much. All right, at this time, we invite members of the audience to pose a question. Please keep it brief and to one question, please. Go ahead.
Hi. I'm wondering about what we've seen kind of laid bare during COVID, and getting partially to the social emotional learning, but just kind of the inequities and the different ways that different families and kids struggled with that, some more than others. And some actually thrived doing distance learning, which is usually not often thought about. But what can we take? Somebody asked a similar question earlier, and I thought it was great. What can we take from what we've learned and seen, and even more evidence of stuff that we knew was an issue before, and do over the next few years during your term, if you were to be elected, to bring the kinds of changes that we need to see?
Well, that's kind of an exciting question. I do think I think teachers and staff and the administration have learned a lot about what they're capable of, right, during a quick pivot. I think a lot of kids have learned that they're capable of more than they think they are too. So at the same time that some things have really struggled, I do think some kids have come out of it stronger. Some kids found that they learn better on their own. So I mean, kids have learned a lot about themselves. I think teachers have added to their toolbox tremendously. Administration has helped them add to their toolboxes to be able to use so much different kinds of tech to help kids learn. I hope that never goes away. The ability now for a kid to be sick, to not be in school, and to hopefully stay connected and keep learning is far better than it was 2 years ago. So I mean, there are side benefits. And as long as you brought up the pandemic, I'm going to add something that you didn't ask about exactly, but I didn't mention in my intro that I'm passionate about. So I have worked for the PCA for 18 years, but for the last 9 months, I was on a small team the governor put together working on setting up the mass vaccination and mass testing sites. So the big ones, Mall of America, Roy Wilkins, Minneapolis Convention Center. It was a small team of people that worked remarkably well together, and lots of scientists, lots of data. I could not be more happy that the district has a mask mandate. If you look at the list of schools in Dakota County that have higher than we'd like to see numbers of COVID, District 197 is not on that list yet. I hope we don't stay on the list, but I think our mask mandate has a lot to do with that. And I'm really proud of our district for making the school as safe of an environment as they can to keep kids in school. Because the other thing we learned in the last 18 months is that the majority of kids do learn better in person, and parents can function in their normal lives much better if their kids go to school. There's families that we just can't reach nearly as easily when their kids can't come to school. Part of what I've been really enjoyed about the campaign so far is reaching out to parts of the community that I just don't have connections to. You know, I'm stepping outside of my bubble, and I'm learning a lot. And I'm learning that if you reach out to certain people, you open the doors open to whole different communities that can help me learn.
Thank you very much for your question. Does anyone else in the audience have a question? Go ahead.
Hi, Sarah. At first glance, I really like what you're saying about your campaign, but I just realized that you were one of the candidates in the running in January for the open seat that Marcus Hill actually obtained.
Yes.
So I'm wondering how you feel about not being moved forward for that position, and you coming back and sharing your platform with us, but it seems extremely aligned with what's currently happening in the schools, which is great. I'm glad to know that you're very well connected. But what fresh perspective, aside from the strategic framework that you align your campaign platform with, will you be bringing other than having connections and having some of those inroads? But I'm missing the piece on fresh perspective.
What's fresh? Sure. So yeah, I did apply in January. I think the pool of candidates in January was pretty incredible. I wish more people would have ran. 10 is plenty, But there's a lot of great candidates. Not at all heartbroken that Marcus got the spot. I think he brings a lot to the board. But as far as a fresh perspective, I think like I mentioned before, like I've been to the school board meetings with my own issues and things I'd like to see changed. By the way, nothing changed with some of the issues I had. A lot of them are related to class size and if teachers are overloaded and if kids are really getting the attention that they need and if we have the right kind of resources in our school. So I wouldn't say that I'm going to be a new member that just agrees with everything that's currently happening. I think my benefit is that I've been paying attention for 10 years and I've thought about running. I did try to run in January and I almost ran last time. Now I'm like really ready and eager after the last 18 months to dig in and bring a fresh perspective. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you very much. That ends our 10 minutes. Thank you very much, Sarah Larson. Our next candidate is Stephanie Auran. If you'd like to come to the microphone. Once again, we'll hear three minutes of an introduction, and then we'll go on to our general question.
Thank you so much for having us. Cheryl, extra big thank you for your advice and suggestions and patience with me. I appreciate that. And thank you all for coming out. This is my first appearance at one of these. Does not come naturally for me, so please, I appreciate your patience. So I am a parent of 3 children at Henry Sibley. Last year was our first year there, and it was a COVID year, so it's kind of hard to call. So this year is our first year. So what it comes down to is I am a parent, and I care about my kids, and I care about everybody else's kids in our community. This is our community, this is who we are, and we all want everyone to succeed and have the best opportunities. So a couple of items, the platforms that I'm running on is like I really believe that parents' opinions matter and that parents really are ultimately responsible for their kids. So we need the input of the parents, a collaboration, just taking in what they have to say and their ideas in order to see really what they see should be happening in the school or where we can improve. There are things we're doing great. There obviously are areas that we need to improve. And me as a parent with high schoolers, I want to see these changes made so my kids are successful. I'd also like to make sure, to see that all parents, every parent is empowered and able to participate in their child's education. And again, that comes with collaboration, asking for feedback, listening, paying attention, and me as a parent, that goes for me too. I need to be paying attention about what's happening in my kids' classrooms, their lessons. This has been a good year for me because I've kind of been one of those lazy parents and I haven't paid that much attention to what's being taught, and I am now. And that's one of the reasons that I'm here. I should have brought water up here. If I'm elected, my goal is I'm going to make parents a priority. It's going to be a lot of work, I understand that, but that is important. So I've attended a couple of listening sessions with the school board. Oh, thank you. You're so sweet. I've attended a couple of listening sessions in school board meetings recently, and again, I was one of those parents that really didn't pay a lot of attention. And what my takeaway with that is there's really a big disconnect between the school and the parents and also the school and the community. So there's a lack of collaboration and communication. In order for our schools to be effective, essentially, we have to be able to engage and grow as a community and work together. So that disconnect has to be bridged. I feel like that's one area that I feel like I would be able to help. Another thing, it's really important to understand how our tax dollars are used and make sure that we see how they are spent and make sure they're spent wisely. I've been questioned about the levy. I am undecided. It is not because I'm indecisive. I'm undecided because I've been working with the school and asking questions about the budget and what money has been spent on, and I'm not getting answers. So until I get answers and can really see where that money is being spent, I am not going to vote yes. I am going to vote no And right now, it is in the school's hands to be able to provide me that information, which I think everyone should be able to see.
Thank you very much. We've reached the end of your 3 minutes. We'll now ask you your general question. What do you consider the biggest challenge facing the district, and what skills or experience do you bring in finding a solution?
I feel the biggest challenge in the school district at this point is removing teachings basically that are divisive, that are separating our kids, and basically pushing down one kid and negating their importance in order to lift another child up. That shouldn't happen any way you look at it. All of these kids are equal. They all have equal opportunity to learn and should be able to learn, and they should be supported properly. And let them just achieve the best that they can achieve. Like I said, we don't have to negate someone or dismiss someone or minimize their importance to lift somebody else up. We can lift them all up. They all deserve that, and they all deserve our attention. The one thing that I feel like I can so you asked for qualities. Amiability is probably the quality that I can bring to that. And you can have a room full of the smartest people in the world, and there are a lot of them in here. And I loved what a lot of the board members and the candidates have to say. I feel like I found myself nodding my head as like, yep, I understand that, I get that, I agree with you on that. So I feel like where I would be an asset is to be able to work with this group and be able to be like, okay, listen to this, and let's see how we can come together and work together.
Great, thank you very much. All right, do any members of our audience have a question? Please keep it to one question. Go ahead.
Hi, I found that when my kids were in school, that the more I got involved in the school, the more I knew about the school, and the more I was able to find out what was going on with the school and have a voice in the school. And I often thought about, you talk about parents schooling their children, and I thought about that myself. I'm a teacher by trade, but I didn't do that. I knew it was I relied on the school district to do that because I knew that they had all the skills and resources and everything that I could, that I didn't have just in my little old house. A lot of people do it with money, more resources nowadays, do homeschooling. But my question to you is, I wonder why you decided to run for school board?
The reason I decided to run for school board is I started paying attention. I had mentioned a little while ago that I was a lazy parent. I was checking my kids, are you your homework turned in? Sometimes, sometimes not. Are you passing? And I was not paying attention. And I started this year paying attention in what was being taught. And it alarmed me, frankly, just as being a community member. I live here. You're all my family, whether you want to be or not. We're kind of all in this together. And when I started going to the school board meetings and started seeing that voices weren't heard, maybe there needed to be a little more community involvement, parent involvement, and collaboration, and just communication. I felt like this might be something that I may be able to help with.
You mentioned about history and the teachings and not wanting one child to feel less than the other, and you're really about what they're being taught. How come you haven't spoke up before when history has long lessened the value of black children? I'm interested in knowing why now, when it seems like we're pushing diversity, equity, and inclusion, that you all want to touch the curriculum because it's making white children feel uncomfortable about the history that has been told to them and not including the real history about black children. So I'm really curious of why I haven't heard you speak up on the behalf of black children in this very same thing.
Well, I haven't spoke up about anything, honestly, if you just heard what I said. I have kind of been a lazy parent. I have been a lazy parent. I have not been involved. This is my getting involved. So that it's nothing, are you asking why I'm not?
I'm asking, I'm asking, why have you not? Because you saying you just getting involved in why run for school board, because you mentioned that your kids only been in a year, so you really don't have a good view of how the community, because you mentioned the community, so you really don't have a good view of what the community means in the black community, what the education system means. So how can you run? Because I haven't seen you talk to anybody in our black community, so I'm curious on how you can really make the statement of like you want to remove the curriculum when you haven't talked to us.
Oh, you know what? It has to be a two-way street. There needs to be an interaction. We have to talk about these things. I have not been involved. I'm not an educator. I am not an educator. I have a job. I have a family. You're right. I haven't. I have not been involved, but I am now.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have a quick question before we conclude with? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been a parent in the district. My kids have been in the school system for 11 years. They've been in 4 of the schools in the district. And I'm just wondering, you said that you were very concerned about the divisive teaching and removing that. In 11 years, I have not come across what I would consider divisive teaching. I really want to know what you want removed from the schools that's currently causing this huge concern for you.
Parents have been reaching out to, so I've been looking at my children's lessons online, and I'm just kind of like, oh, this is interesting, this is interesting. I've also had parents reach out to me and share things with me. For instance, one of a 12th grade parent who I didn't know before reached out to me and said, this was my child's lesson, and forgive me, I can't remember the name of the book, but the lesson was white people are exhausting. And you'd read down and there was a worksheet, and the words actually were used: whiteness, whitewash, white tears, and white supremacy. And I'm like, what? That to me does not, I have a problem with that.
Thank you. I'm sorry we're at the end of our 10 minutes. Thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much, candidate, for being here. Our final candidate that is here tonight is Timothy Aune. I have him come to the... Thank you very much. Once again, thank you to our audience for keeping things respectful, keeping things brief as we've asked, and thank you to our candidates for staying and observing the questions and the answers from the other candidates too. That speaks a lot. Thank you very much. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I haven't gone yet, so you might want to save the respectful part.
There's always one.
I tell people my omnipotence and levity will be my gift to the school board. The first part is a lie. Anyhow, thank you, Optimist, for having us, and thank you all for staying. No promises, that best for last. My name is Tim Aune. I was born and raised in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. I'm a public of Grand Rapids Senior High School. Received a great public education. Enjoyed very much the concept of the school being a cornerstone of the community. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's kind of a challenge. But in my 18 years in Mendota Heights, I do feel that Henry Sibley / Two Rivers is an anchor. There's lots of people, lots of engagement, including the elementary schools and the middle schools. My public school education gave me a lot of opportunity. I was able to go to a wonderful university out in Boston, which opened up even further doors to me. Many of them involved capitalism. I guess I have the advantage I can answer a lot of questions. But my upbringing and my values also require a good deal of giving back. I think that makes us all better. There's no U-Hauls behind a hearse, so instead of trying to garner more, I think it's important to give back. And that was part of my motivation for running for the school board. And I also, should I pivot to the next question, or have I used my 3 minutes?
No.
Okay, well, I did have a very, I guess the other component of my, both my career and my experience post-career, was able to travel around the world, see lots of wonderful things, realize that we're all very common, but it's always nice going through U.S. Customs. This is a wonderful country. But the young woman who spoke at the inauguration, regardless of whether or not you liked who was being inaugurated, I found her words very moving, that America is a wonderful place and it is a work, and we're continuing. We are all obligated to reach for those ideals that are espoused. A lot of differing opinions on how to get there. But back to why I ran, I do know there are some cornerstones that are apolitical, and some of them are truths. And so in the 30 seconds I have left, I was really motivated. I was getting a sea of emails from both sides, if you get my drift, telling me what was happening in my school. And it wasn't true. I had to sign a checklist for my son's English curriculum. I had to sign off on every book. That's about as transparent as it gets. My son is taking math. People who say they don't teach math anymore, it kind of got me upset. They made it sound like my son is going into school every day being recruited for either a fascist organization or Antifa, and neither is happening. He has wonderful friends, and my time is up. So.
Thank you very much. I love a candidate who is self-modulating. All right. Makes me really redundant, doesn't it? Okay, our question tonight, again, is what do you consider the biggest challenge facing our district, and what skills or experience do you bring to finding a solution?
Well, I guess I'll kind of continue that thread. There are kind of national topics and there are political topics that get propagated down. So on face value, making the classroom apolitical, of course I agree with that. But I also know that some truths are absolute within reason. If I drop an apple, it's going to be accelerated to the earth at 32 feet per second. But in terms of our history, things do change. We learn more. There's a different lens. And I get a little bit frustrated. Critical race theory is an academic political science exercise. Anytime a scientist looks at something, you have independent variables. So I got accosted on a pickleball court by somebody saying, and they're looking at solely through the lens of race. And my response is, that was the point of the research. If you have the same income, the same education, the same whatever, the only dependent variable is race, was there a different outcome? And that is political science. And the math my son is learning, if that correlation is between 0.30 and 0.70 on a regression curve, sorry I'm getting a little nerdy here, I went to MIT, that's fine. Now that doesn't mean anybody's getting pushed down or pulled up. And we are not teaching at Two Rivers High School that type of academic research. So here's what my son learned in 10th grade as it relates in his world history class, talking about the issue of race. It talked about we are all implicitly, it's innate, we have implied bias. You're wearing a peach-colored shirt. Maybe you winter in Florida. I can go down and I can propagate a lot of assumptions, and I can make assumptions about who you are. Is that correct? No, it's totally incorrect. But what my son was being taught, that you being aware of that, and saying by being aware, you have to be cognizant of respecting the individual and being a better person. I think that's a good part of a curriculum. Now, if some teacher goes off the rail and says something that I feel is inappropriate for a fourth grader to be taught, because they're not going to have life experience to put that in context, of course, a parent should be able to talk to a principal. And if that principal ignores them and then the superintendent ignores them, then as a school board member, I would have a responsibility to be engaged. But as a school board member, and back to my skill set, I've served on boards. It's not a legislative body, it's not an executive body. We are literally contouring policy around the inertia that is our education system. Curriculum is a 6-year window. You can't go in there and say, gosh darn it, George Washington, there was no slaves on Mount Vernon, and we're going to change that right now, today. That's not going to happen on a school board. My responsibility, and one thing that's uniform across the district of everybody I've talked to, they want to say, is the maximum amount of the resource I'm providing as a taxpayer going to the classroom? That's a fair question. There's agreement. And because there is limited resource, a school board member has to make hard decisions. Would I love to say yes to every teacher contract? Of course I would, but the resource or the money might not be there. But on the flip side of the coin, if we don't do, unless you're not too aware of the labor market out there, just from an economic perspective, treating teachers poorly doesn't make sense. And the last thing, I'm getting really tired of people talking about, we don't teach math, and then they want to talk about an average. There's nothing more dangerous than an average, and an equation is multivariate as a school district. If a number is here, but that number means a student went from being barely passing to being a C- student, yeah, that's still a bad average number, but for that student and the teacher that got that student to there, that's something to be celebrated. That's in the specific. In the aggregate, of course, I hope that by not disparaging what the board has done already, I think they've done a good job. I guess we haven't touched on it. I'm all in on the science as it relates to masks and vaccine education. Vaccines are the way out, and I'm probably going to lose a few votes by saying that. But I was in elementary school in Grand Rapids, Minnesota in 3rd grade, and I got my MMR. Richard Nixon wasn't trying to put a chip in me. He was following good public health policy. By being vaccinated against measles, there's no place for a measles virus to live. That's what we're trying to get to. Anyhow, I'm getting off into the weeds. I'll be done. I'm sure there's people who now really want to ask a question or two.
Thank you. Does anyone from the audience have a question? If you step to the microphone, please.
Hi.
Hello.
We have a very short time, so if you keep
Okay,
it...
real quick.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you the question I want to ask everyone, but you're the last one and I haven't had my
Lucky me.
chance. My question is, in some states that are doing, many states that are doing CRT, they have eliminated advanced classes. And I'm an alum, and my one daughter got her master's degree, my other daughter just got her PhD, and they were tremendously helped by the advanced classes.
Yep.
So I'm hoping to find candidates who will commit to keeping those advanced classes, because those are important too.
Okay, not being a board, that's a great question. I'm going to start off by, I'm not sure if I understand the premise. If the premise is that AP classes and classes for gifted and talented is coming at the expense of propagating agenda of critical race theory, again, collegiate poli-sci department and in the schools. What I see in the schools, that to me is no more than the evolution of a lot of the education as it relates to race. In homogeneous northern Minnesota, my 2nd grade reader was 2 African American girls, Penny and Penny. And I was kind of a stretch because Penny and Penny were not my neighbor, but again, I'm not trying to get too down deep. My understanding is the evolution of where we can address gifted and talented, obviously within elementary schools. By that time it propagates up, now the pathways into community colleges and the University of Minnesota are much, especially living in a metro area, are much more prevalent.
But this is what has happened in other states, and it really concerns me because
I'm sorry, we're out of time. I don't mean to cut you off.
Alrighty.
Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of our candidates.
Yeah, thanks.
At this time, I'd like to introduce the president this year of the West St. Paul Optimist Club for our closing remarks.
Hello, everybody. My name is Cole Taylor Spavin. I am the president of the Optimist Club of West St. Paul this year. We'd like to thank each of our candidates for agreeing to share the reasons they each have for running for District 197 School Board, and look forward to the outcome that will be decided on November 2nd. On behalf of the Optimist Club of West St. Paul, thank you for joining us this evening. As we mentioned, the contact information for each candidate will be displayed in the closing credits of our program. Good night, and thank you.